Welcome back to the Keep Going podcast, Vin Kennedy. I'm your host, Vin Kennedy. Today we have a special guest, John. John, you want to do a brief intro on yourself?
Hey there. My name's John Mott. I'm from Lakeland, Florida, it's about Central Florida. I've been running for about 17 years now. I'm been running at the professional level for probably the last 8 years or so, and I'm also a running coach, and I work with runners all around the country. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's how we connected. And you mentioned a professional runner, and I think there's definitely like even myself, like what exactly qualifies someone as a professional runner?
That's a great question. And technically, I mean, on paper, I wouldn't be a professional runner, but because I've competed in professional fields. So, for example, I ran Boston as a professional, I ran Berlin and Chicago as a professional. So, yeah, so I'm listed in their professional field. So, in that sense, I mean, people call me a professional runner. I don't necessarily say it myself all the time, but in certain situations, yeah.
I mean, I definitely think you're a professional runner. If you kind of want to, I mean, I think this next question will help people understand why. What is your current marathon PR?
So I ran 2:17:20 at Berlin last year, and that's my fastest. I've run 2:17 three times, I've run 2:18 three times, and I've run 2:19 a couple times. So yeah, I got the consistency going there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think I've run a total of 18 or 19 marathons now. I ran my first one back in my junior year of college. So in the NAIA, they have the marathon at nationals. So I wasn't fast enough to make it on the track in the 5K or 10K. So my coach decided to go the marathon route, and that's when I first started. I realized I was like, maybe I am better at the longer stuff, and that's when things kind of took off.
So that's interesting because I feel like a lot of professional runners, however you want to kind of coin the term, but I think a lot of it starts it like track and field, right, in college. So it would start at the shorter distance, and then eventually they kind of drift into the longer. But it seems like you started the longer stuff earlier than most people would have.
Well, I did compete junior, senior of high school in track and cross country, so that's the 5K, and then in college as well. So up until that point, I think the furthest distance I'd raced was a 10K. So I didn't know anything about the marathon up until that point, and I would say I was average for the guys that I was competing against. I didn't realize that like I would be good at the longer stuff until I actually gave it a shot. Like it really surprised me. And that really showed me that, you know, each runner like specializes in like a specific distance. Like, for example, someone could be more speed based, so they're going to be better at the shorter stuff. So like the 5K. But then there's the opposite end where you have no speed, but you got the endurance, so you can go the distance. So like the guys that I'm like currently competing against, like if I were to race them in a 5K or 10K on the track, they're most likely gonna lap me. I just don't have that type of speed, but I make up for it with the endurance. I don't really know anyone else who runs as much as I do. I've for for Berlin, when I ran my 2:17, I got up to 160 miles a week, and I was doing that, on top of workouts. But I've gotten over 200 miles a week before, just kind of test the limits. So kind of like what you do. But yeah, I would say that, they say that, runners have talent, different types of talents. I would say my talent is that I can handle this volume without getting injured, and I respond well to it. I mean, I was a 16:30 guy in high school for 5K, and now I'm running a faster pace for the marathon. So,
It's crazy. That's awesome. And I guess that kind of is like another avenue, right? Where everybody thinks it's like the speed days and the track days are where you're going to kind of build that. But you've kind of taken this other shift where it's like, okay, well, when it comes to straight up speed, I'm not going to obviously beat these guys. But when it comes to just the long endurance, and it seems like volume just kind of is what you really lean on.
yeah, 100%. And it took me a little bit to realize that, like, I didn't just like jump up straight to it. Like, I think that first marathon, I was, around the 80, 90 mile mark. And I was like, man, it feels good running this mileage. So throughout the years, it was a slow process, but it was like the more I increased, it was like the faster I was getting. So for me, yeah, I respond to the mileage well. Like for me, I like to focus on your daily mileage. You're getting that, you're getting the volume in, and I feel like that builds my strength for, after 20 miles in a marathon. Now, this training approach may not be the most beneficial for like the 5K and 10K stuff because then it's like I have zero speed, but that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make because for me personally, the marathon's everything.
Right. And I mean, also like just to caveat it, like I know for a fact, like you hop into local 5 and 10Ks and you win them anyway. Like it's not
Those,
like
yeah,
no speeds there.
those I would say like those are doing it more for fun, just kind of like get into a race situation because I'm not someone who likes to race a lot. So like when I'm training for a marathon, I'm not racing during the buildup because I feel like it's taking away from the training. Like I want to have that consistency the week in, week out. So yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And the main question that I've been reading actually I think it's The Science of Running by Steve Magnus. And something that's just been rattling my head is like, how do people get faster, in your opinion?
Oh man. That can be a tough question to answer. From my experience as a coach, not even my opinion, but what I've seen with my runners, running more mileage for sure. I would say the runners who are able to, let's say increase from 4 days to 5 days or increase their weekly mileage, like those are the runners that are improving and getting faster. The runners who are out there focusing on like your speed intervals, like trying to hammer those every week and then not really focusing too much on the mileage, missing runs, those are the ones that are not having as much success.
Yeah,
So, yeah. I mean, some coaches may not agree that running more will, is the right approach, but I mean, I'm seeing it with my own eyes. So, and it's
yeah,
not even me necessarily scheduling them to run more. Like I would say around 25% of my runners, there are days where they just do what they want and, they're running more than what I have prescribed. But it's like, it makes me nervous, but it's like, well, it's working. So
right. I would probably fall into that category.
a little bit.
And then another thing that I wonder is, so obviously, like when you're in person with people and coaching them, like you could kind of gauge, and I guess there's certain tests and stuff to do to gauge like lactate threshold and stuff like that. What are some like metrics that you personally use?
Ooh, yeah. So I don't technically need to be there in person. Like I just need to see the data pretty much. Um, but yeah, when I'm on Strava, for example, and like even if I'm just clicking on like someone's recovery run, their easy run for the day, and like I'm seeing they have consistent paces and they're not stopping their watch the entire run. Like if they're doing that day in and day out, and I'm seeing that consistency, it's like they're gonna have success on race day. So yeah, that's just a couple signs like pacing, like consistency, like that's having self control with the pace. Um, a thing that's been frustrating me lately as a coach is, I'm having to check the elapsed time with my runners. Like, it's like in a way they're inflating their paces, and I don't like seeing that because it creates this false fitness almost in a way, and I think that can lead to issues on race day. Um, but yeah, if also long runs are very important to me. Like if you're hitting those like week in week out, and even the marathon pace miles during the long runs, like if you're hitting those sessions, it's like man, you're gonna be set up good on race day.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And what would you say is the most important style of training or run during a marathon prep specifically?
the true long runs for sure. Those 18, 20, 22 milers, just the time on your feet. So like in my opinion, so we're talking about the marathon here. So with the marathon, in my opinion, it doesn't matter how much speed you have. I'm a great example of this, but I mean, as an example, let's use like a 4 hour marathon, or I coach a ton of 4 hour marathon runners. And it's like, so if I ask that runner to go out and run a quarter mile at, let's just say their marathon pace, I mean, that's going to be pretty easy for them. Even if they run a quarter mile at 5K pace, like that's all the speed you need for the marathon. Like Like what I get confused about is why runners are running like short speed intervals during marathon training. Like it's a beneficial workout, but it's not specific towards the marathon. So yeah, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because I have seen that too, where like people do like 400, 800 meter repeats in a marathon prep, and it makes sense to me your method where it's like, well, why don't you see like the mile repeats or even 1200 meters or 1K? I feel like it's more beneficial to see the distance with like building the volume out.
Yeah. So like I do prescribe a couple speed sessions during marathon training, but they are specific to the marathon. So we're trying to run more volume, but we'll slow it down to like 10K pace. Whereas typically like during like a half marathon build up, we're doing like intervals closer to 5K pace. So it's not as much volume, but it's a little faster. But for the marathon, it's more volume, just a little slower. So yeah, but yeah, in general, those true long runs, just the time on your feet, that's what's going to have you the most ready after 20 miles of the marathon.
And then as like a coach, obviously analyzing the data, like are those true long runs kind of what give you the best metric of like, okay, this is the pace you're going to kind of fall around for the marathon?
No, I would say the marathon pace sessions for the long run. So with my schedule for marathon training, I like to alternate every other weekend. So we're doing like a true long run, 18, 22 miles at like an easier pace. Sometimes, I'll say you can progress the pace. And then the weekends in between, it may not be as long. So maybe, 14, 15, 16 miles, but we're going to do some work at marathon pace. So if you're hitting those marathon pace sessions, the 8 to 10 to 12 miles at marathon pace, then you're in a good position. So
And then as far as consistency with like hitting the plan, do you like to see like is there a percentage that you kind of fall into? Like if someone hit 80% of the plan, is that like kind of and I mean as far as like paces and then obviously runs as a whole, is there a metric that you use? Because most people aren't as consistent to hit 100% of the plan, of course.
I would say if a runner is 80% with their training, as long as they're still hitting the important sessions. So like 3 weeks out, I'll schedule 14 miles at marathon pace. So up to that point, if they've done 80% of the training and they've hit that session and some of the other important long runs, then I still think they're in a good position. But you're taking the risk and you won't know until after 20 miles. So, for example, my runner, Maria, for example, who just ran Philly, so she had a super tough build up with injury. She had about 3, 4 weeks of training, and it was like you're nailing the training for these 3 to 4 weeks, but we really don't know what's going to happen. So, like, it's like I told her, I was like, you're not going to know how you're going to respond, what's going to happen until after 20 miles, until the fatigue has really set in. So yeah, I'm all about consistency with the training. So like for me, if you're hitting that mileage, you're in a good position, even if you failed every quality session, as long as you're getting that volume in. So I'm a good example of that. So for Boston this year, it was a tough build up for me, but I was getting all the mileage I was wanting. I built up, I was going like 120, 130, 140, 150, 160, just straight through. And I was hitting the mileage, but I was not hitting any of the quality stuff. Like I could barely run a couple miles at marathon pace. And it was like, man, I think I'm just too fatigued. And everyone's telling me I need to like back off. I need to, so I can hit the faster stuff. But I know that as long as I have that volume there, that's going to give me confidence after 20 miles. So if you notice, I keep saying after 20 miles because that's when the
Yeah.
race really begins.
No, absolutely. And I obviously I live there. Like I love after 20 miles is like I mean racing and easy pace after 20 miles is two different games. But I love the idea of belittling the distance because you're just there all the time. Like you said, like a lot of people don't love even racing it. So it's like I'm not telling people to run easy pace marathons every weekend, but when you do belittle the distance, it's not that like daunting thing that we tend to make it.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. So for me, I'll build up to 28 miles for my long runs during marathon block, and it's like, why do you have to run that far? I was like, but why not? Like For example, like if you're running a half marathon, you're doing long runs over distance. Like with the marathon, you can still do that as long as you're doing it safely. Like ultra runners, they're doing like 30, 40 milers on the weekends. It's like they're allowed to do that. They're fine doing that, but a marathon runner isn't. So, like, I understand there's risk involved, injury and overtraining and things like that, but certain runners can handle it. Like you've been handling it. Like I keep thinking it's like it's gonna catch up to him, and it's just like, well, he just nailed this speed session. It was like, it's like, as a coach, like it's like I should be telling you not to do that, but it's like you're still doing what you're supposed to be doing. So yeah,
Yeah.
you're doing the training, and I'm good with it as long as it's not negatively affecting anything. So,
Yeah.
and I think you're responding well to it. Like I think that your marathon coming up is going to be successful.
Yeah.
I don't I
Appreciate
don't
that.
I don't picture you bonking. Let's just say
Right.
that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, the last couple miles definitely aren't going to feel good, but yeah, I don't see myself bonking either. But it's come from that. Like it's just like belittling the distance, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it. Like I keep wondering. I mean, I'm fairly new to this. I started not the June that just passed, the one prior was when I like actually started taking this consistent and serious. Before that, I did, but not like in 2020 I did. So I had like 2 years off of running, which I mean, I know that even 3 weeks, I feel like a big difference. But yeah, like I'm wondering, so you had to see it with yourself, obviously. Like there's gotta be that wall that you hit where it's just like the newbie gains almost kind of like fade away. And I'm wondering where you saw that with yourself. Like, was there a specific point where like, I mean, you started hammering 217 marathons. Like now for you to go under 217, like what does that look like? Obviously you said adding the volume, but like how long do you think it really took you to hit that like almost like that wall?
You mean like a plateau, like not
Like
being.
the wall of potential, really. Yeah, like yeah.
Well, let's first start like when I first started running, like I was having those huge initial fitness gains, like any normal new runner would. So, but then it was just a slow progress. I dealt with my injuries in college, but it was after college, I was still like at my considering at my level, like I was still a mediocre runner. But then I was like, I made a goal that I wanted to qualify for the Olympic trials for 2016. So this was back in 2015. And I was getting ready to run the Houston half marathon. And I was like, I'm going to go all in on this. I'm going to really increase my mileage. I remember that cycle. I think up until that point, I had maxed out at like 110, but then I was like, we're going to get up to 130 for this build. And it was, man, I responded so well. I went from a 110 half straight down to a 105 half marathon. And that was a time that I didn't think would ever be possible for me. But little did I know that that was just the beginning. So the next year, went and ran my first non-college marathon. It was back in Houston, and I ran 218 and qualified for the trials. And it was like, man, I mean, it was the mileage for me. And then now that, I was a 218 runner for a long time, like I thought I wasn't going to improve anymore. But then COVID happened, and I was like, there's no races happening. I was like, let's give this mileage another increase and see what happens. So I did it again. I built up to 160 this time. And then I ran 217. And I was just like, wow, that's all it took was just running more. Like I didn't change anything else. And then from there, I kept it. I did it again for Grandma's Marathon back in 2021. I ran 217 again. And it was just like the mileage is really working. So now I'm at that point where, I've run 217 3 times. My last two marathons did not go well. So I'm not really sure I can run much more mileage. Like I'm also 36 years old, so I'm getting to that point. Um, so I am going to try to run a little more of this build up for the Olympic trials in February, but of course we'll see how it goes. But we're planning it. We're going to plan for 170 this time and see how it goes.
It's awesome. And just for people that work like pace per mile, what is a 217 pace per mile?
I think it was 514 pace when in Berlin it was 514. I remember I went out in like 109 something and I came back this back half in 107. and that was a huge negative split race for me. And that's typically how I race my marathon. So when I have people tracking me, it's like they're all nervous the first half, and it's like, dang, he's really picked up the pace. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
And that's actually hits on like another topic too, which is like, do you feel that like runners kind of have, so obviously you said people have like their shining moments almost as far as like speed or endurance. Do you also feel that way as far as like race strategy? Because I feel like a lot of people tried a negative split, and I I haven't perfected it, that's for damn sure. But how do you feel about it?
For me, 100%. Like, there's so much, even at my level, you'd be surprised on how bad some of these guys are at pacing. So, like, for Boston was a good example because the pro field is separate start. So it's just our group. And I remember they took off on me. And I remember looking back at the mile marker and I was in last place out of the pros. And it was just like, man, I thought I was running too slow, but I was still rolling through the mile at 5:15. But I just held steady, and eventually I rolled a bunch of those guys back. Berlin was the most fun with that because I was rolling up so many guys the back half of the race. So, but yeah, definitely being patient, um, running tangents. Some sounds super simple, but when I'm out there, I'm like focusing on that so much. I'm trying to cut every turn. Like I'm not trying to run over distance.
Yeah, that's crucial. And I think it's something that's overlooked because of the hype of, the crowd and just everything. I feel like people get in that race environment. It's just
Yeah,
like it's just frantic. And that's also why like another thing that I've been doing is just hopping into these races and like being around the atmosphere, like you just get more comfortable in it.
I agree with that. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
I would
And
say
then
just to add to that, there was a race where the plan was to not be conservative and to actually take the risk and go for it. And that was a disaster.
what did that look like?
It was Indianapolis Monumental Marathon 2019, I believe. I thought I was in the best shape of my life. I hit the halfway mark. I was like, man, I'm about to run a 2:17 here. It's about to be my breakthrough race. I remember I was catching the leader of the race. This is a big marathon too for me. And then at mile 18, I went from running 5:15 pace to like 7-minute pace. And then I was walking. It happened so quickly and it was a disaster. I went out too fast.
Yeah, it's so tough. It's so tough. And then even like I feel like everybody tries a negative split, and it's just so I've recently got way better with pacing, but it's tough. What is something that you see that like I just feel like obviously running has gotten a lot of popularity in the last couple of years, especially the last 2 years. It seems like it's like really blown up. But what have you seen as far as like what really makes someone a better runner overall? Like when you see just the whole picture, like is there like a deciding factor that you've kind of seen that separates people from like actually reaching their potential?
Kind of back to what I was saying before, mileage. I mean, if you're able to put the work in, just getting out the door and putting the time in, I mean, that's really it. Like with my training, there's really nothing special about it. I'm making them pretty much. I'm holding them accountable, my runners, and yeah, it's pretty much making them run, and that's how they're getting better. I hope that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, that can be a tough question to answer. But overall, with my experience, it's just the mileage part. Like, like I keep saying mileage, and I don't want anyone to think that I'm having all of my runners run crazy high mileage. That's not the case. But I am having them run what what I think they can run without getting injured. So it's all relative. So it could be 30 miles a week for a runner. It could be 60, 80 miles a week for another runner. But yeah, as long as we're able to pretty much get the runner as close to that breaking point without going over it, pretty much.
I'm curious what you see because I know you have over 100 clients, correct?
I have just over 120 clients now.
It's awesome. And I'm curious what you see as far as like consistency. I mean, obviously, anybody that's looking for coaching is generally going to take it somewhat serious, but what have you seen with like people actually being consistent with following the plan?
Man, it's all over the place. It's totally,
Really?
totally all over the place. I have runners that are 100% dedicated. Like they're trying to hit specific paces for easy runs. Sometimes they're overthinking it. I'm okay with that as long as they're putting the work. Then I have runners like I, I hate to say it, but I have runners that are paying me not to do the training. Like like it's a hard, a tough situation for sure because there's only so much I can do, and I don't want to upset the person by like you didn't run today, like what's going on, like you were supposed to do the long run this day, and all of a sudden you're doing it on a Monday, for example. It's like things like that where I don't like seeing that, and when I see that, it's like, man, they're gonna have a tough race. It's things like that.
Yeah,
Um,
no,
but
it's so true. I just
I would say the issue that the biggest issue that I'm having lately is runners inflating their times with the elapsed time on Strava. Um, I I mean, I understand sometimes you have to stop on your runs if you go to the bathroom, you have to fuel and hydrate. But when you're having like 30, 40 minutes of elapsed time, like yeah, I don't like seeing that.
and what would you say is your proudest moment with racing or
My,
running as a whole?
for my running or for coaching?
Either way.
With coaching, I would say there's a couple races. Houston 2022, I had about 33 runners compete in both the half and the full marathon, and I want to say only like one or two of them didn't PR. And I was like, man, I had runners hitting the trial stand, the qualifier. I had so many BQs. It was the perfect race. And then the other race it was just a local 5K here. They have like a team competition. We create like teams of 10 runners. And I was like, I was able to have six teams, so 60 runners running this race. And like I have a picture of all of us together. And I was like, man, we just took up like half this race. And it was like, man, that's a good feeling. And everyone's wearing my shirt. So it was like, man, that's awesome.
Absolutely.
I would say, as far as my own running goes, Houston 2015, when I ran my big breakthrough marathon, my 218, and it was like I was just I didn't think I would ever be at that level, and all of a sudden I'm getting ready to run the Olympic trials. So yeah,
Yeah, that's so awesome. And the last question I ask everybody is what keeps you going? Like what's your deep why? Like when you're the back half, when you hit mile 20, what kind of pushes you through?
that's a tough question. I mean, definitely doing it for the success. I mean, I can't lie. Like if I wasn't like at my level, a 217 marathoner, I'm not sure I would be running the amount that I run now. So yeah, it does definitely boost my confidence. Like it makes me feel like running a fast time, being successful. Like it makes me feel good about myself. Like, that's, I don't know. Maybe I'm having a hard time putting it into words, but yeah, when I'm out there, it was like, man, if you can just close out this last 10K, like you can go celebrate. It's all going to be worth it. It's something to feel good about. So, and that's tough with the marathon because you only get one shot.
It's true. And honestly, like even it sounds like what you're kind of hitting on there is like what we spoke about before we started recording, where it's like, it's just such a big part of you, right? Where like it matters, like it's allowed to matter.
Yes, there you go. That's a great way to put it. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I feel that.
running, it's my life. Running and coaching, like you know, being asked like, who are you outside of running? Like, honestly, I have no idea. And I read that question, and it was like I had time to think about it, and it was like I run and coach. My job is about running. Like whenever I'm talking to someone, 90% of the time it's about running. It's like I like to do things like I like to go to the beach. I like to go out to like restaurants and things like that. But that's just like basic stuff. Like there's no like specific hobbies or interests other than running that I do or interested in.
Yeah. No, listen, I'm right now I'm in the same exact boat, and I get like fixated on things like this from time to time. This one doesn't seem like it's going to go away, but I think there's a beautiful thing about obsession. I really do. And you could even see like what lights people up and gets people excited. And I think it's like something that should be more embraced, especially when it's like a good thing that like you built out an awesome community with. Not to mention like the personal success.
Yeah, yeah. I do love running shoes. I probably have over 50 shoes in there.
That's awesome. But honestly, man, I really, really appreciate the time.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me. I hope everything I said, like I will say that I had a hard time putting some of these things into words, and if there was anything I said that maybe like came off wrong, like that's not how I meant it. Like, um, I promise to everyone I'm smart with my runners, with my coaching. I feel like I do a very good job. I think my runners, like they like me in general. So,
I'm a big fan.
thanks.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure.